What is up? Welcome to Etsy Jam, episode 71. Get ready for two awesome back-to-back episodes with Julianne from TheGarterGirl. In this episode, Julianne talks with us about blogging, staying in your niche, the importance of great photos, and more. Then, next week, in part 2, we will take a deep dive and explore a promotional opportunity available to all Etsy sellers that hardly anyone is taking advantage of. Stick around for another great Etsy Jam. What is up? Welcome to Etsy Jam, the show where we have splendid conversations about serious topics. I am Gordon from Marmalead.
And I am Richie from Marmalead. And if you haven't heard what Marmalead is, we are the best Etsy SEO and market research tool for serious sellers. You might ask yourself, why Marmalead? Well, the reason is simple, and that's because Marmalead keeps it simple. Have you heard that less is more? Well, that's what Marmalead stands for. It's our pleasure to serve the Etsy community with integrity and the highest quality products on the market. That's what you can count on. Go check out marmalead.com, marmalead.com.
And we have a very special guest with us this week. We have Julianne from TheGarterGirl. Thank you so much for joining us, Julianne.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I'm a huge Marmalead fan. As I told you guys before, very much changed my business since I discovered it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Julianne is a bit of an expert in the affiliate marketing field too. So we're going to do something a little different with the jam this time around. We're going to break it up into two parts, and we're going to talk, do our normal jam that we do with guests the first time through. And then in part 2, Julianne's going to do a deep dive into affiliate marketing and how you can use that as an Etsy seller or as a blogger to kind of maximize the potential of the Etsy platform that some people aren't taking advantage of. So definitely stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. And then in part 2, we're going to do a deep dive into that. But before we get too far into things, do you want to give us a little bit of history about yourself and how you got started with Etsy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my first business, TheGarterGirl, in, I think it was 2004, when my friend could not find a wedding garter for her wedding. So I've always been one of those annoying, crafty people. And so I just made it myself because Etsy wasn't, at least to my knowledge, really around back then. So I made her a wedding garter. And then, of course, my friend owned a bridal shop at the time. And she said, "What do you mean you're going to make it?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'll figure it out." And then she said, "Well, let me see what you come up with." And I showed her, and she said, "If you make me more of these, I'll sell them." And that's really how it started. See, in 2010, I started a blog for weddings in Washington, D.C., so I was doing the wedding garters, and then I said, you know what, this area really needs to have a blog. Everything that, I see on the national wedding blogs that happens in Washington, D.C. doesn't actually look like what happens here. So I started a real wedding blog for the D.C. area. It was like an online magazine, but in a blog form.
Okay.
And then it became too much just running the two different businesses. So in 2016, I sold the blog and went to TheGarterGirl full time. So that's kind of my story. Yeah, I live here in Washington, D.C. and just hang out with my kids and sew garters and blog.
Do you want to give a shout out to the blog, or would you rather keep that URL?
Oh, like the name? Oh,
yeah.
It's called United with Love. Yeah, it's still around. The girl who runs it is fabulous, and it's called United with Love. And it's so in the wedding community, there was this thing where like big national. So there's like The Knot, and there's Brides Magazine, and then some other smaller blogs started up, which are not so small anymore. Mm-hmm. And then in the past couple of years, it's really gotten into more niche type of stuff. So that's why the local blog thing has really worked out.
Gotcha.
I just kind of hit it at the right time.
Nice.
So it's very localized.
Nice. So what made you think to jump into that? I mean, do you have a history, like is your background in writing, or do you just saw a need?
I worked in politics and media before the Garters. I worked on Capitol Hill for a while. I worked in the White House administration for a while. Then I had, hence the DC thing. Yeah. I had my daughter, and I just knew that I couldn't keep that pace up with a kid because it's real. So I stayed home with her for about a year until I was like, God, I need to do something. And that's when I thought, well, I'll do the wedding garter thing. And once I get bored with it, I'll just give it up. And so I've just been kind of doing it ever since. And So no, my background isn't really in writing, but it's definitely in media and marketing and things like that. And so with the Garter Girl, because wedding garters are so sort of weird yet unique, yet I don't even know. When I first started, I had a hard time getting businesses to publish my work, like different magazines and things.
Okay.
And then blogging started to become a thing. And I thought, well, I'm just going to do my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you mean? I get to like just put out on the internet? Like, this is amazing. I can just put my sort of my own press release out. And that's really what my blog for the Garter Girl came to be.
Mm-hmm.
It was my opportunity to tell my story and my message in my way. And I was able to speak right to my potential customers. So I sort of bypassed magazines that way. And it really started to work out for me. And yeah, I mean, I would try to go to these bridal salons to get them to carry my stuff. And they were like, who are you? You're kind of a nobody. And so then I thought, well, I'm going to go out and get all these magazines to like validate me.
Sure.
And then even they were like, no, you're a nobody. And so then that's when I turned to my blog.
Yeah.
And I just, no one told me no. So I just blogged all the time. And so I really taught myself how to blog and some of the, just like enough back end stuff to get by, really. And then when I launched the blog here for DC, again, I just kind of knew just enough to kind of get by on the back end. I'm really not like into the tech side of things. I just am into like, education and kind of putting out their information that's helpful to people, and people really respond to that. So.
Nice. And so that ended up taking up a chunk of your time then, and you sold that off, you said.
Oh yeah, it's a huge time suck. And people think that blogging is, unless you have a blog, you don't think it's that hard. Until you have one and you realize it's not actually hard. It's just really time consuming.
Sure.
And so I couldn't physically do both. And so I chose the Garter Girl because I actually made things and that's what I was passionate about. And
yeah.
So,
now with your shop on Etsy, then did you start finding success with that immediately, or was it a slow ramp up, or was there like one moment where you're like, right at this point is when things really started to take off for me?
It's gone through different phases over the years. My love-hate with Etsy. I mean, when I first got on there, I thought, oh, this is great. Look, they kind of do it all for you. And then I felt like people were really price shopping me. And whereas I was on my website, I was all by myself, and it was a little bit harder to price shop. And so what I've done over the years is I would put just my sale stuff on Etsy. And so it would just be kind of like almost like my clearance page.
Gotcha.
And I would kind of separate them that way. So my website, was just where I sold my collection and my custom products. And then on Etsy, I would sell my sale stuff. But like I said, I've kind of changed it. And then when I found Marmalead, I discovered that Etsy SEO was a thing. And so I went back and started to put some of my products on there. And they've done obviously a lot better than I ever have. And then I'm still kind of playing around with what Etsy is and what it means to me and what it means to my business. But what I like is that you can kind of just change it up when you want. Because the barrier to entry, at least for me, is so low.
And so you had a friend help you get set up on Etsy the first time and kind of like showed you the ropes about how to get things listed on there, or did you just kind of run with that on your own?
No, I just figured it out.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people, oh, you should be on Etsy. And I'm like, what is this thing? And so then I checked it out, and it's really not very hard, as you know, to get set up. But for a while, I would get really frustrated before I discovered that Etsy SEO was even a thing, because I felt like my products looked so much different than everybody else's. I felt like they were unique. And once people did find me, they were always pleasantly surprised. But I just had a hard time getting in front of people. I would say in the last 2 years, I really stayed on Etsy and maintained my presence on Etsy so I could do some of the affiliate things that, we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But through that, then since I discovered Marmalead and Etsy SEO, things have been much different on Etsy. I think I've been able to sell more just because I've been able to get my products in front of people, and because they do look so different and my photography is so different. And my approach is so different that it's been good for me.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to say your photos are really nice in your shop too. If you're listening in and you haven't checked out Julianne's shop yet, you should go do that on Etsy to see what we're talking about here. But do you do your own photography, or do you have a photographer that you send products to? How do you set that up?
I do not do my own photography. So if I have a custom order, I will take a photo and send it to the client because it's impossible to get a photographer in here in the time in which they usually need it. So I've taught myself some basic stuff, but it's not good. I learned a long time ago, and once I did, it changed my business dramatically, that I was not a photographer. And in order to sell products, you have to have good photographs. I know everybody talks about that, but it's true. It matters. It's like taking your hobby to a real business. And for me, it wasn't as expensive, I guess, as I thought it was going to be. So yeah, I straight up pay for product photography.
Do you do them like in a batch? Do you bring a bunch of products somewhere and do like a photo session there, or do you like ship them off one at a time? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's also, it's a challenge. So no, I send them. I keep my collection small. It's around 20 products in my collection, and then from there people can customize. But it's important for me as a product-based business. Okay, so 80% of my business is custom, and about 20% is you buy it outright. And for custom, and I don't know if you know anything about sort of how brides work, is that as an industry, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, only one.
So well, it's really about consumers, and why things like Etsy work is that everybody wants something custom. They want something unique. They want to feel special. Yep. And it's not just a bride thing. It's really just a human thing. And so for me, as a product-based business, I put my collection out there, but then once they take my design, change the color, now it becomes custom. So I think sometimes for creative people, and when I first started my business, for creative people, I used to just say, well, I'm custom. I'll make you whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so for a non-creative person, that's difficult.
Right. I don't know what I want.
Put the finger on what I want. So once I developed a collection, got it professionally photographed, it completely changed my business because I was able to put my products out there, put my designs, and then they'll say, well, I like that, but can you do the bow smaller? Like, can you merge these two styles? And now all of a sudden it's custom, but it's still my design.
Gotcha.
And they feel good and I feel good. And it's a win-win.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I know that because I'm not real creative in that sense, I love the idea of options, but if I'm given too many options and if like it kind of lets me color outside the lines too much, like, okay, pick 4 colors for this thing to go on this thing. I'll make it so ugly because I can't pick 4 colors that look good together like that. And then I'm like, whoa, like just off the shelf, please, or somebody else, like, please help me make it look good. I know all these other ones look great. I just wish I could do it. I can't. So I definitely get it. Sometimes it's really hard to like connect those other dots.
Well, that's what I always say. There's 2 types of clients in the world. There's creative ones and non-creative ones. And the people that are creative, they're going to customize it no matter what. You could put 1,000 products out there and they're still going to want to make it their own. And then for the non-creative ones, which is pretty much everybody else, they're going to take what you have and customize it. So if you have a product and like I said, 80% of my business is custom, even though I do have a collection. And it wasn't until I had a collection that actually my custom business took off. So if you're an Etsy seller out there and you mostly specialize in custom, I highly recommend coming up with a collection because it's an easy way to get your ideas and your designs out there. And then people can customize from there.
Do you see that 80-20 breakdown on your own personal site to kind of match Etsy, or do you think you sell even more custom things on your own website?
I sell more custom on my website because Etsy doesn't allow you necessarily. So on my website, I have a gallery, a huge one of all the custom stuff that I've done. And Etsy doesn't really necessarily do that. They don't let you just kind of like on the product page, it'll say customize this for yourself. And that's where the client will usually contact me, or they'll contact me outright, or they'll say, oh, I saw you on Instagram. A lot of what I do is I take old wedding dresses and they'll send me like their mother's or their grandmother's veil or wedding dress or something, and I'll make a garter out of it.
Cool.
So a lot of times they'll just message me through Etsy because I feel like, so having my website's been really great for me. And it's where I've done the bulk of my business over the years. But there's a certain subset of customer that just feels more comfortable on Etsy.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that, it's been really good too. Cause they'll say, hey, they'll message me through Etsy and say, I saw you on Instagram or I was on your website. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't you just email me? But being able to purchase through Etsy makes them feel more comfortable. Like they get some sort of comfort in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not, a completely crazy person, or I won't take their money or something like that.
Right.
So I think just being able to, or people will message me through Etsy, we'll go through the custom design process, and I'll say, now, how would you like to pay? Would you like to do it through Etsy, or would you like me to send you a private link? And they'll say, no, I want to go through Etsy.
Mm-hmm.
So that
it's
just this, like, everyone's different. And I've just noticed over the years that there's a certain client where being on Etsy makes them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Even if they found
that's
me on my website.
That's how PayPal grew so big. It was that whole PayPal protection thing.
Mm-hmm.
So people really got accustomed to, that's the safe way to pay. So it makes perfect sense that Etsy started really marketing around that too. Like, hey, we're going to make this whole thing a safer process for everybody.
Yeah. And once Etsy started doing their own payments, that changed for me too. It used to be that the majority of the payments would come through PayPal. And then once they switched and offered their own type of payment, I noticed that almost exclusively I'm getting Etsy payments as opposed to through PayPal. For me, it's just all about trying to be where my customers are. And it's been my website or on Etsy.
So other than, having the blog and the shop going at the same time and really being, pressed for time on those, what other struggles have you had selling on Etsy specifically?
Just getting them through the SEO in front of people's faces. And then trying to, in a very quick, short period of time, explain to people that, I'm not a crazy person, that I will fulfill their order. I think that, people have this fear a little bit of independent artisans, that they're going to take their money and run, or that they're not going to do what they said they were going to do. A lot of my reviews are like, wow, didn't expect it to arrive so nicely, or wow, arrived faster than I thought, or, it's a lot of that, surprise, which works out for me in the end. When you're lumped in there with everybody else on Etsy, they don't know what they're going to get. And it's a bit of a risk, just kind of handling that risk a little bit. And then, like I said, the whole issue with price shopping on Etsy. I mean, I do it, I'm searching, I'm looking, and I'm comparing. And, for a while, I thought that I would try to win on price by only listing my sale products. This was before discovering Etsy SEO. And then once I did, I realized that I didn't even have to worry about competing on price, because once you kind of compared mine with others, if the client responded to it, they didn't necessarily care about the price.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you find the right market, with the right keywords and the people that are searching for those specific things, and you'll be all right.
Yeah, I've just tried to, like I said, try to differentiate myself, like with the photography, to make it look different, way different than everybody else. And I get a lot of, like, people will say to me, can you make this style of garter? And, it's not what I do. And I'd say, no, but I know you're going to find somebody on Etsy that can do that for you. And most times they'll say, thank you, or wow, I didn't know, I didn't think of that. Or so, because I have a very specific style that I make. And if you don't want that, then I'm not the person for you. But because I have such good Google SEO, like on a search engine, I get tons of questions looking for different styles. And my answer is always, I'm not the right fit for you, but I know you're going to find somebody on Etsy.
Yeah, that's nice. And that's nice that you have the opportunity to be able to, control what you're creating and make sure that you're doing things that you enjoy, so that you can be, putting your heart into things instead of like, oh, another one of these orders. Like, a business is business, but you got to do it even though you're not super excited about it,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I see people who make other wedding garters on Etsy, and I'm like, man, I know I could do that. I know I could do that for way cheap, and but it's just not necessarily what I'm interested in. And I don't. And I kind of just stick and stay in my lane and do what I do and just have sort of faith in that, because it's easy to get distracted, especially in the creative community, and especially for creative people too. You're like, oh, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. And like, it happens a couple times a year. They'll say, well, I really want a ring bearer pillow to match this. Can you please do this? And I always say, yes, but please don't tell anybody, and I rarely post photos because I don't want to do that. Like, I can do that, but I don't want to do that.
Right.
And, I think it's the curse of most creative people. It's like, of course I can make a ring bearer pillow. Of course I can. Like, I wouldn't call myself a sewer if I couldn't, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to
make a bunch of them.
Well, but it's hard to stay in your lane as a creative person because it's so easy to get, well, I could do that and I could do that and that and that and that.
Yeah.
And that's why I've really had to force myself to just stay in my ultra niche little section.
Yeah.
Because it's narrow, but it works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, once you start, for me, especially once you start getting out there and you're making this and that, it becomes impossible. So that's why I just stuck to like one thing. And I said, like, once I get bored with this, I'm going to either switch it up or move on, but I'm still not bored yet. And I still don't even feel like I figured it all out, and I still only make one product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess
the struggle's real.
The struggle is real. Well, one thing you have figured out is affiliate marketing, and I'm going to use that to segue into part 2. So thanks for taking the time to join us. For everyone that's listening, make sure you guys stay tuned, because we're going to have a part 2 to this with Julianne, where she does a deep dive into affiliate marketing, what it means for you as an Etsy seller, what it means for you as a blogger if you have a blog. And this is something on Etsy that, well, they've had it like a year now, I think, right?
It's been about a year, yeah.
Yeah, and
maybe longer.
You're the first person that's reached out to us to talk about affiliate marketing. I don't think it's very widely publicized or known that this is even a feature of Etsy. So no matter which side of the fence you fall on, it's going to be useful to you and your use of Etsy as a tool. So stick around for that. But thanks so much for joining us, Julianne.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You guys are awesome.
Thanks. And for everyone else, we'll see you guys next time on Etsy Jam. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Etsy Jam. In the last episode, I mentioned that we have a fun announcement coming up, and that is that we are going to put one Easter egg in each February Jam. The first person to hear or see all of the Easter eggs and send us an email at success@marmalead.com will win a fun prize. So keep your ears perked, your eyes peeled, and tune in to next month's Etsy Jams.